I'll start my business when I have more savings. I'll travel when the time is just right. I'll finally be happy when... We all tell ourselves these stories. We live our lives in a state of almost, waiting for a set of perfect conditions that never seem to arrive. We call it responsible planning. We call it being realistic. But what if it's not planning? What if it's the most sophisticated form of fear there is? The ultimate self-sabotage disguised as prudence. I used to live in that waiting room, but I learned that the perfect moment is a myth. In this episode, we're going to dismantle that myth and discover the profound freedom of embracing good enough. If you feel like you're on the verge of starting your life, this conversation is your invitation to finally step across the threshold. Before I started this channel, the Freedom Equation existed as a collection of notes on my laptop for over a year. I had the name, I had the mission, I had pages and pages of ideas for episodes, but I didn't have a single recording. I told myself I was in the planning phase. I was waiting for the perfect microphone, waiting to get better at audio editing, waiting until I had a backlog of 10 perfect scripts, waiting for a moment when I felt completely ready, completely certain, completely bulletproof against failure or criticism. Of course, that moment never came, because it doesn't exist. That perfect moment I was waiting for wasn't a strategic delay, it was a fortress. A very comfortable, very reasonable-sounding fortress I had built to protect myself from the terrifying vulnerability of actually starting. This is the perfectionism trap. It's perhaps the most insidious form of self-sabotage because it masquerades as a virtue. It dresses itself up as high standards when in reality it's often just fear in a fancy coat. It's the voice that whispers, "Don't start yet. You're not ready. You'll fail. It won't be perfect." It's the engine behind the great "I'll be happy when" fallacy. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll be confident when I lose the weight. I'll feel peaceful when I finally move to a new city. We defer our lives, our joy, and our sense of worth to a future destination without realizing that we are stuck in a waiting room of our own design. So why do we do this? In her powerful book, The Mountain is You, Brianna Wiest explains that self-sabotage isn't born from a desire to fail. It's often a misguided, subconscious attempt to meet a deeper, primal need. The act of waiting for the perfect moment is a strategy to meet the deep, primal need for safety. If you never launch the business, it can never go bankrupt. If you never submit the novel, it can never be rejected. If you never start, you never fail. You remain safe in the familiar discomfort of your current reality, because the unknown feels so much more threatening. The mountain you're supposed to be climbing feels impossibly high, so you choose to camp at the base, telling yourself the weather just isn't right for the ascent. The antidote to this paralysis is not more planning. It's a fundamental shift in focus, an idea championed by the ancient Stoic philosophers. It's the separation of process from outcome. Your task is not to guarantee a perfect outcome. That is impossible. It's not within your control. Your task is simply to engage in the process, to do the work right here in this imperfect moment with the imperfect resources you have. Think of it like this. Imagine you want to cook a beautiful gourmet meal. That's your goal. The perfectionist trap tells you that you cannot begin until the kitchen is professionally sanitized. Every ingredient is perfectly measured and laid out in tiny glass bowls, and you have the finest cookware. You spend all your time preparing to cook, and you never actually turn on the stove. The process-oriented approach says, start now. Start in your slightly messy kitchen with the ingredients you have. Maybe you have to substitute an onion for a shallot. Maybe your knife skills aren't perfect. It doesn't matter. The learning, the growth, and even the joy are found in the messy, imperfect act of cooking. You must fall in love with the process, not just the fantasy of the perfect final dish. What perfect condition are you currently waiting for before you allow yourself to start something important? More time? More money? More confidence? This leads us to the most liberating concept of all, embracing good enough. In our culture, good enough sounds like a compromise. It sounds like settling for mediocrity, but it is not. Good enough is a rebellion. It is an act of courage against the tyranny of perfectionism. It's the wisdom to know that version 1 is infinitely more valuable than version none. The first draft of a novel is supposed to be messy. The first attempt at a new skill is supposed to be awkward. The first video on a YouTube channel is supposed to be imperfect. That is how growth works. It is through the process of creating something good enough that we learn how to make it better. Perfectionism starves that process before it can even begin. If you knew the outcome wasn't guaranteed, but that showing up for the process would teach you something essential, what would you start doing today? My own journey with this channel began the day I let go of the need for it to be perfect. The day I decided that my task was simply to hit record and share an idea even if the audio wasn't flawless. Even if I stumbled over my words, I had to embrace that a good enough episode that existed in the world was better than a perfect episode that only existed in my head. The great irony is that the perfect moment you are waiting for is right here, right now. It is this moment, because it's the only one you have. It is messy, it is imperfect, and it is pulsating with potential. Freedom is not a destination you arrive at when all conditions are perfect. Freedom is the choice you make to show up for your life as it is today. It's the courage to be a beginner. It's the grace to be imperfect. It is the wisdom to love the process of becoming without needing to have already arrived. Stop staring at the mountain. Take the first, clumsy, imperfect step. The climb itself is the point. Your real life isn't waiting for you in some distant future. It is waiting for you to simply turn your attention to the present and begin. This week, I invite you to choose one thing you've been putting off until the time is right. Don't think about the finished product. Just commit to the messy first step. Write the terrible first paragraph. Do the awkward 5-minute workout. Send the imperfect email. Embrace the glorious and liberating feeling of simply starting. Thank you for joining me on the Freedom Equation. Protect your peace.